Hey guys, welcome to Unit 5, Lesson 6. And in this lesson, we're going to go the other direction. Instead of using double angle identities, we're going to use half angle identities. And so all of these here are your equations that you need, or the formulas that you need to know for today's lesson. So I'm going to try to maybe, there, we can fit that into one screen. While you're copying this down, just kind of listen to me. So notice that there are three tangent ones. So it's just kind of like the ones that had like the multiple cosine ones, yes, or the last lesson. These are going to have multiple tangents. So like we just use them for different reasons. The other thing I want to point out is the plus or minus. That depends on which quadrant you're in. So like let's pretend that you have sine in quadrant 4, then obviously you're going to use the minus on that one. So if you're not done copying down those formulas, push pause, and then we will move on. Okay, guys, tread carefully in this section because a lot of you guys answered this the wrong way on the quiz. So notice how it says simplify. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at which one of these up here it looks the most like. So let me just back up. So 1 plus cosine of alpha divided by 2. So notice it's that one there. So I'm going to come back here. So we're actually working backwards. So we're starting here, and it's going to be just like this on the test. You're not going to put in like unit circle values or anything like that. So we're starting here, and we're going to go back here. So I know that it's a cosine of alpha over 2. And so I just have to figure out what alpha is. So if you'll notice, the alpha is 18. So I'm just going to say the cosine of 18 divided by 2, which gives me the cosine of 9 degrees. So that is what it's going to look like on your quiz, not anything else when it says simplify. So look for that word simplify. Okay, so let's go to this one. So same thing. So see if you can do this on your own. Okay, so hopefully you saw that first of all it was sine, and then the second thing you needed to figure out was that the alpha was actually 8x. So then I set it up with 8x divided by 2. So again, I just kind of want to clarify that this section is pretty easy. You just have to know what to do. So make sure you're looking for that on the quiz. Okay, so for the next one, let's go ahead and keep going. So why don't you try these three on your own? Okay, so here are the next three. And again, notice the word simplify. We're just going backwards. And the last thing I want you to notice on this is that notice I had two different tangent forms on that one. You'll see that sometimes. Okay, so just like in the last lesson, this lesson is actually very similar to the last lesson. So now we have an angle measure, and we're going to have to determine the exact value. So that's where like your special angles, all that stuff goes in. So everything we're going to be doing today, instead of multiplying by 2, we're going to divide by 2. So think about something divided by 2 to equal negative 67.5. So what's nice is that we can just multiply those two together. So negative 67.5 times 2, that's going to be negative 135 degrees. So I'm going to set up the formula sine of negative 135 degrees divided by 2, and then just fill it in that sine formula. So let's go back up here. So I'm literally just following that formula there. I'm going to change colors. Okay, so first of all, this whole thing is underneath the square root. Okay, and then second of all, we need to make sure what that is on the unit circle. So a reference angle is going to be 45. Let's think about negative 135. So this is negative 90 going this way, and so this is going to be negative 135. So I know that not only it's a 45-degree reference angle, but it's also in that third quadrant, which makes it negative. So let's clean this up a little bit. Okay, so cosine of a 45-degree angle, that's square root of 2 over 2, but it's going to be negative. So negative square root of 2 over 2 over 2. Okay, so now it's just a bunch of algebra. So I think what I'm going to do is multiply both the top and the bottom by 2. And don't forget that this is all underneath the square root. So I'm going to look at this as square root of 2 plus square root of 2 square root of 2 over square root of 4. So I'm just going to leave this craziness on top here. Oh, and don't forget keep forgetting that negative here. And so the final answer is going to be negative square root of 2 plus square root of 2 over, and the square root of 4, we can clean that up. So we don't have to rationalize the denominator or anything, so that's nice. So this is your final answer, even though it looks super duper yucky. One thing I just realized that I didn't talk about is why I had this negative out here. So remember, up here, we had the plus or minus, and I chose the minus because, again, we talked about a while ago, it's in quadrant 3, and so sine is going to be negative in quadrant 3. So that's why I chose the negative versus a positive. So I just want to clear that up before we move along. Okay, so the next part is cosine of pi over 4. So remember, just like this one, let's kind of get our minds wrapped around something we're familiar with. So I'm going to do something divided by 2 equals pi over 4. Let's do that. So sorry, I backed up. So something divided by 2 equals pi over 4. So we're going to multiply those two together. So 2 times pi over 4, that's pi over 2. So let's kind of clean this up a little bit. So I have the cosine of pi over 2 divided by 2. And so I'm going to use the cosine formula. So let's go back. So pi over 4, that's in that first quadrant. So I know it's going to be positive. Okay, so let's see what the cosine of pi over 2 is. So I want to focus on that right now. So pi over 2 is right there. And so the cosine of pi over 2 is going to be 0. So I have 1 plus 0, which is 1. So I have the square root of 1/2. So I have 1 over the square root of 2, which is square root of 2 over 2. And again, it's going to be that positive because of this being in quadrant 1. Okay, so go ahead and try this one. This one is very similar to this one up here. I think this should be a little bit easier. Push pause and then we'll come back. Okay, so as you'll see, it's very, very similar to this one, even in like the answer to it. One thing I do want to point out, because I think this can get confusing, is this is where you figure out, like, that's your actual angle. Even though you use the 225 in your equation, your actual angle is going to be the 112. So I base that plus or minus off of your original angle. Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, So let's try a tangent one. So same rules apply. It does not matter which tangent formula you use. That's totally up to you. So I want you to choose one, and I'll choose one, and we'll see if we end up in the same spot. Okay, so I chose the yuckiest formula. I thought that maybe that would be the best way to go. And so if you'll notice, my answer has like a square root within a square root, and that's okay. When I said that everybody will end up in the same spot, that's true. But if you do some of the easier ways, you're not going to have like the square root within the square root, so your answer might look a little different. What I meant is like if you typed your answer into the calculator, you're going to get the same yucky decimal in either one. So I actually did another form, and I ended up with negative 2 minus square root of 3. So if you type that in your calculator and that in your calculator, you're going to get the same thing. So that's like a way to kind of double check yourself if you need to. Okay, so let's go to this. We've kind of done problems like this before. So we're going to this next piece here. Okay, so what I did is I paused the video and I just kind of filled out the circle given this. So I just kind of assumed, since angle A is acute, that we're just going to assume that it's in quadrant 1. Okay, so I went ahead, you know me, like I always like to have the sine, cosine, and tangent, like a visual of that before I move on. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to start with one of them. So I'll walk you through the sine one. So sine of A over 2. So I'm just going to use that formula. And again, it's in that first quadrant, so we're not going to worry about plus or minus. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is that cosine of A is 1/4. So I'm going to plug that in there. So I have, let's see, 1 minus 1/4 is 3/4 divided by 2. So times 1/2 is 3/8. And so, sorry, I forgot the square root. So we're going to do the square root. We're not done yet. Sorry, not done yet. So I'll clean this up a little bit. So we have the square root of 3 over, I don't know. I think I'm going to go ahead and simplify. The square root of 8 is 2 square root of 2. And then I'm just going to multiply by the square root of 2. And I get square root of 6 over 4. Because I have 2 times 2, which is 4. So my final answer, when I'm totally done, is square root of 6 over 4. So I'm going to do the other two. Go ahead and do it and see if we can get the same answer. Okay, so this is what I came up with for the last two. So here's cosine and here's tangent. Again, you don't have to use this particular one. Honestly, I would just use the one that's the easiest for you, whichever one that would be. I wouldn't think the one that I did last time. I purposely chose a hard one. I wouldn't do this one. I would do like one of these down here. So that's it, and we're done.